It's the biggest game of the year for the Golden State Warriors, and I have a legend in the sports journalism industry, Howard Beck, joining me next to preview that and so much more. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And here at Locked On, we're stoked that Howard Beck is part of the team, contributing for a lot of shows here, including Locked On Warriors. Pleasure to have you, Howard. You can follow Howard Beck on Twitter at Howard Beck. Great to see you. How's your day going? And what are your first impressions of this wild Warriors-Lakers playoff series?
Hey, Cyrus, thank you for all that. Appreciate it. Good to be with you on a gorgeous day here in Brooklyn, New York, as I'm sure it is out there. I could see the sun slightly peering in through your blinds there.
Yes,
the
sun is here. Yeah.
This has been listen, it's funny, like for such a marquee series, I don't feel like it's been quite as riveting, or as the fireworks haven't quite been there in the same way that like Warriors Kings was. Like that series was a blast. That was the best series of the postseason so far. Unfortunate that it had to be so early in the playoffs. You always want the marquee ones to be later, which brings us, to the Lakers Warriors, which again, like I'm still grappling with the idea that we have Steph versus LeBron in what may be the last edition of this, an edition that we never thought would even happen, really, right? Like the Lakers have been such a disaster the last couple of years. No one could be sure that there was even going to be the possibility of Steph versus LeBron chapter, what are we on? 6 or whatever? 5
or 6. Yeah, sure.
Give or take, whatever. Who's counting? And that it happens in the second round is kind of a shame. But here we are. I think overall, my impressions are that you can see why these two teams met up as the 6 and 7, because even though they both finished the season as better teams than when they started, and I think in both cases their records are not reflective of who they truly were, and their seedings are not reflective of who they truly were. These are flawed teams, and in the Lakers case, this is a team that's really only been together in this form for a matter of weeks, months, I guess, but a couple months. LeBron is clearly not 100%. And, I know nobody is at this stage of the season, but it still comes off. It feels like a heavyweight bout. Little disappointed that the Warriors didn't take one in LA, not from any standpoint of loyalties, because I have none, more just the sense that like I wanted this to kind of be that punch counter punch kind of series where it's just back and forth. The Lakers steal home court, the Warriors steal it back, and that kind of thing. And disappointed too, because as I've said many times, including again yesterday on Tom Tolbert's show, I have an irrational belief in the Warriors, having covered them even from afar, right? Like I've been to all those finals. I've covered the championships. I've covered the years that they lost to. I've been in and out of the Bay Area to do a bunch of features on this team. I feel like I know them pretty well for somebody who's 3,000 miles away. And I do have a certain amount of irrational belief in them, and kind of in the aura of them, in the mystique of them. And also just in the fundamentals too, because the fundamentals are that Steph is still playing at an MVP level. And I think Klay on the whole is better now than he was a year ago when they won the championship. And Draymond is still playing at an incredibly high level. And there's just the presentation of a team that I just, no matter what happens, no matter how bad the road record or anything else, I still kind of stubbornly believe. So I thought they would take one in LA. Phenomenal, kind of re-entry into the series by taking Game 5. I have no idea what's going to come in Game 6. We'll get to that later, I'm sure. But it has been not quite the fireworks that I expected, but still compelling.
I agree, and a lot of that I think is the Lakers style of play, right? They're plotting. I don't know if that's the right
Yeah.
word in terms of
Yeah.
watching them go up and down the court, but they're a much more defensive oriented team versus the Kings. And I agree that Warriors Kings series was just fireworks. It's very exciting, very entertaining, and the ratings confirmed that. People loved it. Game 6 is obviously on the radar. We're recording this on Thursday, May 11th. The game is going to be Friday night. I imagine Dub Nation is feeling the anxiety of that already. We're gonna and talking about Game 6 is obviously going to be a huge focus of today's show. One I don't know if you call it an adage, a title, but Game 6 Klay is, speaking of auras and mystique, has really been an incredible just idea over the years, largely from 2016 when the Warriors found themselves in a similar situation to now, down 3-1. In that case, it was against an Oklahoma City Thunder team that was damn good. I don't know how they compare to the Lakers. Very different, but menacing and imposing nonetheless. But this is not the same Klay as 2016 Klay. A lot of people are banking on that. I've said that if Game 6 Klay shows up, the Warriors should win this game. I mean, that could be a difference maker. Is there any possibility of Game 6 Klay? Your thoughts on Game 6 Klay? Can we see it? Take it away, sir.
I believe in Game 6 Klay. Even though I'm a nonpartisan, I am I guess kind of a tangential believer in Claytheism, which I believe I can't remember if the Ringer coined that a few years back. It might have even been Grantland. It was so long ago. Claytheism became a thing. I did a piece with Klay back in I think December, just on where he was at and his aspirations and the poster he's got hanging, or not, it's a clip hanging in his locker of all the guys who have won 5 rings that he's trying to join, and just kind of this reminder of what his goals are. Love everything about Klay as a competitor, and about just his self-belief and everything that goes into that, and admire the hell out of how far he's come back, considering the back-to-back devastating injuries, written off multiple times, and was pretty good in the postseason last year, but not the old Klay. And I think we've seen more of what looked like an approximation of the old Klay in this season. It's been a little up and down in the playoffs, and certainly in this series. Will Game 6 Klay, return? And by the way, in sort of his hometown, essentially in LA, in an arena where he has spoken glowingly and sentimentally about the meaning of the Lakers, a team he grew up rooting for, his dad's team, of this,
right.
Obviously that was back at the Forum, but still, the location kind of matters. His games so far on the road in this series, not that encouraging in that regard, right?
Mm-hmm.
15 points in Game 3, 9 in Game 4. Did not shoot well, particularly in either of those.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if he just maybe he's too hyped up for those games in LA, with all as openly as he's spoken about the sentimental attachment and the meaning for him. Maybe maybe it's too much. But then again, the last 3 games, period, including, Game 5 wasn't exactly a banner performance for him either. I guess I'd make the argument that he's due in that regard, right? He's gonna, if we're gonna regress to the mean, he's gonna ascend to the mean in this case. Yeah. But the point of Game 6 Klay, though, if we're gonna back away from the poetry and rooted in the fundamentals, the point of Game 6 Klay, to the extent that has been a thing over the last 7-8 years, is that he's a gamer, right? It's that, here's a guy who, he may have his ups and downs. He makes a lot of his living off of his shooting, and shooting, even for the greatest shooters of all time, and he is among them, can come and go. That rhythm, feel, comfort, whatever, the way you woke up feeling that day, whatever might ache that day, things get in the way. So you can't, the guys who, 7-footers who play inside, like it's less of a rhythm thing. You're close to the basket. When you're a shooter, it's maybe just a biorhythm sometimes. But I think, I just think that the Game 6 Klay concept exists because Klay brings it when it matters most. His focus gets that much higher. His competitive intensity all comes behind it. I expect we will see a pretty strong performance from him in Game 6, but I hate making predictions even at the game level, much less at the individual level. But I suspect we'll see the best of him.
Yeah, Clay's had an interesting series. I don't know if offensively he's lived up to the standards that he set himself, which has been just remarkable over the years. But what I saw in Game 5 from Klay was, and from the Warriors in general, was just simplifying things. In Games 3 and 4, particularly, I feel like Klay forced a lot of shots. He wasn't shooting based off rhythm. He was shooting just based off, I have the ball, I'm just going to chuck it, and that strategy's never really worked for him. And I thought in Game 5, he simplified things. The shot attempts were down. He focused more on defense. He had, I think, 2 blocks in that game. So his defense, his size came through. I'm very curious to see what happens in Game 6. The myth of Game 6 Klay has just grown so much over the years. We didn't see it in the Kings series, which was a little concerning, but he has a chance to redeem himself here. We're going to have a lot more with Howard Beck in just a moment. Got to give some love to eBay Motors, one of the official sponsors of the Locked On Podcast Network and Locked On Warriors. And for a championship team like the Golden State Warriors, I'm going to cling on to calling them the defending world champions for at least one more day. It's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or your money back. It's that simple. You just drag your part. If it's a green check, it's going to work for your car. If there's no green check, it's not going to work for your car. That's a guarantee, because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Motors and eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items apply. Exclusions apply.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. Every dayers. Tomorrow on the show, it's post game. We're going to be joining you live right after the game in what I feel is the biggest game of the season for the Golden State Warriors. And I'm joined by legendary sports journalist Howard Beck. You can follow Howard on Twitter at Howard Beck. So Game 6 is here, and I'm going to ask you for your prediction at the very end. But in your opinion, this has been a series of adjustments. Almost every game we've seen either Steve Kerr or Darvin Ham make adjustments, and they've oftentimes paid off. What are you expecting in Game 6, if any?
Whew. It's tough to. It's honestly tough to say. I try not to do a lot of mind reading in this job, and I try not to. Outguess or ridiculously out strategize people who are paid millions and millions of dollars to do something that they have studied for their entire lives. I just write about the games. I just get to, kind of enjoy it, see what's unfolding, observe, analyze to the best of my abilities, and convey it to the people. So I don't mean to shy away from the question in any major way. It's just more like, I don't know. I can't wait to see. Like I'm not looking for anything specifically myself. I've never, my brain is not geared that way, to be honest. 26 years of covering the NBA, I've always kind of gone in with the sense of like, let's see what unfolds, because I'm here as a reporter. I'm here to observe. I'm not here to try to, and again, like I know the era we're in, we have to predict everything. We have to pick apart everything. We have to second guess everything. Whatever decision the coach made that worked, we praise them for. Whatever coach decision was made that didn't work, obviously they're an idiot for having tried it. Whoever played and failed shouldn't have played. Whoever didn't play but might have succeeded, maybe hypothetically should have been playing because they're better than the guy they chose. Like that's the cycle. It's not my cycle.
That's fair. You're a journalist. You're what you're saying is exactly what I feel a journalist should do. Unfortunately, It depends on the format, right? In a format like this, I got to throw a lot of stuff out there and entertain the masses, if you will, and keep things riveting.
Absolutely. And I apologize if I have not been entertaining enough in that regard.
No,
I'm not coming in here with fiery takes that Gary Payton should get the ball on every possession, play all 48 minutes. Moses Moody should start ahead of Klay. Whatever it may be. However, whatever the span of reasonable to ludicrous takes could possibly be, I don't have it.
I try to avoid ludicrous. I try to be reasonable at all times, but I hear what you're saying. Well, let me ask you this. I'll throw out to you what I saw in Game 5 in terms of adjustments,
sure.
and you tell me what your thoughts were on that. I thought the Warriors did 3 things fundamentally in Game 5 that worked, and I think if they stick to that in Game 6, it will work as well. I'm curious to know what Darvin Ham will do. We've seen Lonnie Walker not play early in the series. He's now become an integral part of the rotation. You can also say the same thing about Gary Payton II. He was out of the rotation early in the series. I thought the 3 things Kerr did, and would love your thoughts on this. I thought him trusting Gary Payton II more, playing him in pivotal minutes, was huge. In Game 4, Gary Payton II played 2 minutes in the fourth quarter. All at the beginning, we never saw him again. I thought that was a mistake that Kerr corrected. They didn't need that in the fourth quarter because the game was taken care of mostly, but he was there for all those important minutes to guard either Lonnie Walker, D'Angelo Russell, sometimes LeBron James, and it was effective. So I thought that was adjustment 1 that I loved. Adjustment 2 was emphasizing a reliance less on the three-point shot, which the Warriors were forcing a lot of in games 3 and 4, and simplifying things by maybe making the extra pass, going for the easier bucket, which in the postseason, as I'm sure you know, Howard, is what it's all about. You can't rely on the three-point shot in the postseason, in my humble opinion, because they don't fall in the same way they do in the regular season. Games are tight, pressure is high, shooting percentages drop. You need those easy baskets, and the Warriors remembered that. And number 3 was Steve Kerr remembering that you also need size in the NBA. In Game 4, outside of Draymond Green, the only other bigs that played for the Warriors were JaMychal Green, who played 2 minutes, and Kevon Looney, who played 10 and change. And he added 10 more minutes of bigs outside of Draymond Green in Game 5, where we saw Kevon Looney play over 20 minutes. I feel if he sticks to that formula, they should be fine in Game 6. Your thoughts?
The size thing is interesting, as you say that. I was just thinking, like, where else do you? I mean, so Looney, I've never been clear on exactly what the illness was or how that was affecting him. The fact that he was like not starting because of the illness, but he was still playing, but under minutes restriction, like granted, it's a little hazy. And I've not been at the series. I'm in New York, so I am in no position to shed light on that. But to the extent that they have not used a lot of size, they don't have size. They don't have size. Like Looney's their one true big, and he's been under the weather in this series, as far as we've been told. And Draymond is their other quote unquote big, and he's not your traditional big in that regard. Anyway, and then where else are you going? Like JaMychal Green, like we've seen a little JaMychal at times, but like you don't consider him a big. You don't even think of him as a big, really. He's got height,
typically,
So typically, I don't know where else they would have gone size-wise, to be honest. It's been a tricky balance anyway, because on the one hand, you are trying to do what you can to make Anthony Davis work, and to get a body on him, and to give yourself a chance to rebound and everything else, right? So you the Anthony Davis, LeBron James, as you said earlier, the big plotting front court that the Lakers present, means you have to at least respect that and possibly counter it to an extent. At the same time, going small has actually what's been working for them in this series. And Game 5, a lot of it was about pace, right? Like a lot of it was just about speeding things up. You talk about over-reliance on the 3. I never worry about, especially with the Warriors, with the best shooting backcourt in history, I'm not worried about them over-relying on the 3 because they're a great three-point shooting team. And sometimes some of the other guys are along for the ride, and sometimes they're not. Wiggins, it comes and goes. Poole, it comes and goes and goes and goes, it seems lately. And Peyton will hit some open shots. Draymond will hit the occasional open shot, and had a nice 20-point game in part because of that. But I think, to the extent that, yes, the playoffs are about trying to get yourself easier baskets, and especially like a team against a team like the Lakers, where challenging them inside is not a great formula unless you've really got them spread out, or unless you are just scoring more on the move and not letting their defense get set, or going quickly enough that they are ending up cross matching and they're out of sorts and their rotations are off kilter. So they sped up the pace. It was a concerted effort in Game 5, and like that as much as anything worked. And I think being small for a lot of the game is helps facilitate doing that. So And so this is why I don't like getting caught in the trap of like, well, what do they do in game 6? Well, they'll probably try what worked at game 5 until it doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And I don't know what the Lakers, how they may counter that. We'll see. I also, by the way, like there's at least some mystery about Anthony Davis's status. So you and I are recording this at 3:23 Eastern on Thursday.
Correct.
I have no idea if there is an update. I've not seen any update on Anthony Davis. I assume, given that there was no discussion or announcement after the fact that he was being put through concussion protocols or evaluation, that they maybe have determined he's fine. There's obviously another, more than 24 hours to go here before game 6. And so I would assume Anthony Davis is playing in game 6 and that he will play at close to 100%. But I'm at least curious about that part of it. The other curiosity you mentioned, Lonnie Walker the fourth, and here's a guy who, speaking of the why wasn't the coach playing him all along kind of routine, he has that great game 4, but like, he's been a bit up and down for them, and that he had a great or was it game 4? Was it game 3? Whenever it was. But if the Lonnie Walker game is going to be repeated, it's more likely it's going to be repeated at what I will still call Staples Center than somewhere else, right? Like, so you have to keep an eye on it. It's always, and by the way, that's the thing about the playoffs, and that's the beauty of it that we can't predict. It's some stray performance, right? Like we may yet see the Jordan Poole game of this postseason,
right?
I don't trust that that's the case. He's been, I don't know what's going on with Jordan Poole. I think the Warriors must just be wringing their hands so hard behind the scenes about his play, especially with the contract they awarded him in the preseason. No, it's tough. I mean, I don't say it lightly. Like it's and nothing against Jordan Poole, but it's just like you can't have a guy with those expectations and that responsibility and that kind of contract being as just erratic as he's been. And if they were to get through this series, and now they're facing probably Denver in the conference finals, and then maybe the Celtics again in the finals, whatever, like at some point along the way, like they're gonna need the Jordan Poole we saw. And again, it wasn't consistent last spring either, but you're gonna need to see at least a steadier, more consistent version of him if they're gonna get through.
No, you're absolutely right. Before you go, just 2 final questions. The last will be your prediction for Game 6, which again is just monstrous. So I think it's safe to say the biggest game of the year for the Golden State Warriors. Games 1 and 3, something particularly stuck out, I think, to all of Dub Nation, and particularly to me, was the free throw disparity. It was profound. In Game 1, the Lakers had, if I have my math here correct, 29 free throw attempts to 6 for the Golden State Warriors. And then in Game 3, we saw a similar pattern where the Lakers had 37 free throw attempts to 17 for the Golden State Warriors. So they had 20 more free throw attempts in Game 3, 20 in Game 1. Yet, courtesy of NBA stats page, the two teams drive to the basket almost identically. I understand the Lakers have a more traditional big in Anthony Davis, who probably will draw more fouls. Same with LeBron James, who's just a massively huge human being and is easy to draw fouls as well. But something smells wrong to me here based off those numbers. Your thoughts on that?
I'm not a big one for officiating controversies, and nor to reducing the fairness of officiating to simply how many free throws each team shot, because there's context to that all the time. And there are plenty of times that a team comes out of a game, there's a massive free throw disparity, and it's the first thing somebody tries to go to as the rationale. But if you will go back and look at the game, it's like you see exactly where it happened. Like, unless there were a series of clearly blown calls or questionable calls, like usually the free throw pattern, give or take, yes, every game there's, I think the NBA has had the stat in the past where they, whatever, our officials get like 90% of all calls right or something like that. There's some sort of general overall
I've seen that too.
Success rate, right? So yeah, every game there's going to be some calls that were missed. We see it all the time in the last 2-minute reports, and you can extrapolate from those and assume that the other 46 minutes have a similar rate of missed calls, missed non-calls, all that stuff. But the mere fact of a disparity in free throws or in shooting fouls is not indicative of an officiating problem or an officiating bias or a team being screwed. It's usually indicative of playing style, and sometimes it's indicative of like whether a team is like defending with their feet or their hands, as the old coach adage kind of goes, right? Like, so I understand that from a fan standpoint, people might make a lot of it, and maybe that is I wasn't aware of it, but maybe that's been a point of consternation for Warriors fans.
It has, big time.
I try
Big
not
time.
to tell fans what they should think about anything. But I generally have unless there's something that I personally observed or saw like there was something severely problematic, like I generally kind of let that stuff fall away. It's not usually persuasive to me. And yeah, the Lakers do have the size, and yeah, they are going to be trying to score inside more because they have Anthony Davis and LeBron James. And your point is well taken about if the stats site says, if the tracking numbers say that they were driving an equal amount, that is a data point, and certainly an important one. It does not tell us the rest of where those drives were, how many of those were, and what the defensive posture of the players involved were. Again, like you'd have to basically go back through every single shooting foul on tape.
Fair.
So, sorry. Again, I don't have a hot take for you there, but
no, it's okay. It's just because the problem is, and the reason why Dub Nation and myself to a certain degree take issue with this is that those are free points. That goes without saying.
Yeah.
But what it also does, every time the refs stop the game for those free throws, it allows the Lakers to set themselves up defensively. One point that's been highlighted in this series is the Warriors scoring less than they typically do. And that's a huge reason for it, is that the Lakers are getting these absurd amount of free throw attempts, and they're allowed to set their defense instead of the Warriors having a transition type offense, scoring easier baskets. Not to mention, I guess the part that really stuck out to me is the number of free throw attempts from the Warriors is 6. That's 6 in game one. And you never hear Steve Kerr make attributions pertaining to the officiating. You rarely, if ever, hear that. And then he came out and discussed the flopping antics. I'm not saying semantically what he said, but you reference the flopping antics of the Lakers, and it's clearly on their radar as well. I'm just hoping for a more. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, look, and flopping, whether it's an issue in this series, any series, flopping is an issue for the NBA. Period. I used to make. I had a running joke that people would consistently fail to understand the point of where the occasional in the last like 2, 3, 4 years, the NBA would actually announce that somebody had gotten a fine or a warning or a fine for flopping. And I would say, and I would tweet something like first flopping infraction since 1974 or something like that. And people be like, no, this guy got rung up for it in 2015. Like, you idiots. Like, no, the point is, the NBA once upon a time, 10 years ago, announced this big crackdown. They started the whole warning and fine system and all this. And for a while, there was a flurry of these. And it was going to be, we're going to, get everybody conditioned to stop embellishing and snapping their heads back and all this stuff. And then it just kind of went away. The flopping was solved. They fixed flopping. Congratulations, everyone. Raise the mission accomplished banner. Flopping no longer happens in the NBA. How do we know? Because no one ever gets fined or warned for it. Therefore, there couldn't be any flopping.
Right.
Good job. Everybody solved it. I don't know what it's going to take for them to try to reinstitute or re-emphasize that part of it. Maybe they just realized it is a fruitless task because everyone's snapping their heads back all the time. The neck muscles in NBA players has got to be the strongest muscle of anything in their entire bodies. It's my favorite ones. I'm trying to remember. There was one recently. My favorite ones are the ones where live, if you're sitting there, you're watching and you go like, "Ooh, oh man, that looked bad. And then they do the slow motion replay and you go like, I didn't touch him. Like, and you realize like literally didn't touch him, or caught him in the chest, but he snaps his head back and puts his hand over his mouth and grabs his mouth as if you got him in the mouth. There was in fact contact. There was probably a foul, but it was to the chest and not to the face. But you sell it with the snapback and the hand over your mouth. Those are my favorites, by which I mean my least favorites, and they happen a fair amount. But in live action at real speed, it's hard to pick up on that. It's only when you see the slow-mo replay and you go like, "Oh, give me a break." So those are tough. And I don't blame Kerr for citing it. I don't blame Darvin Ham for kind of firing back or just dismissing it, whatever. Like, this is part of the gamesmanship. I covered Phil Jackson for 5 years in LA. Like, the gamesmanship of the postseason, at least in part, and Steve Kerr is certainly a Phil Jackson disciple among other disciples, like, yeah, that's what you do. You try to work it a little, or even if you're not working it, the idea, because it's a different officiating staff the next time anyway. You're not accomplishing anything after the fact. What you are doing is trying to let the league know, listen, this is what we're seeing, and you guys better be seeing it too. And in between games, when you're prepping, when the next staff is prepping for the next game, there are notes from the series at large by the officiating crews that worked them, by the league office, and you are, oh, here are some trend lines. Here are some players who've been getting into it with each other that we got to keep an eye on because we don't want things to get out of hand. We might have to, hand out early text to keep this in line. But also things like, oh, we've been missing, 3 seconds on this one guy who's been, whatever. We've been missing whatever element of the game. So when you are raising that, sometimes you're doing it because you felt like it was a real problem in the moment and in the heat of the moment. And then sometimes you're trying to just, make sure that the league knows that this is something you're seeing. And so, yeah, did that feed into the free throw disparity? Probably. But I'm guessing there was more to it than just that.
Howard, before we let you go, and you and I are both born and raised Bay Area natives, even though you call Brooklyn home now. You and I are both, I think, on the older side of folks who follow the NBA. I think it's safe to say, when I was young, watching the NBA in the 80s and 90s, I don't remember flopping being a thing. I used to like really mock soccer for that reason, and it's sad to me now that this is a prevalent thing in the NBA.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with that or not, but
I guess it's the part of the glow. I blame Vlade Divac. Shaq, it drove Shaq nuts. Then again, Derek Fisher, Shaq's teammate. Sorry, Fish. Fish was a pretty good flopper himself. Sold some calls in his day. But Vlade, I feel like, to the extent that this comes from soccer, then we have to blame international sports, and international sports brings us to the Europeans, which brings us to Vlade. So
there you go.
I'm going to say it's his fault. But
I love it.
Vlade, great guy, great humanitarian. But yeah, he certainly did his share of selling back in the day. I grew up in San Jose, but the Warriors, when I was growing up, I don't know about you, and we have about an equal number of grays in our beard, I believe. But I always tell people,
you're
like,
aging
when they ask,
good. You're aging well. Yeah.
when they ask about growing up in the Bay Area and sports fandom and everything, and I always try to explain, like, the Warriors were barely even a thing when in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up. It was the Raiders for a long time until they left. It was the Niners, of course, and the Niners are the team that really got me hooked on sports as a kid because of Joe Montana. It was the Giants and A's. It was sometimes in a given year, it was Stanford and Cal. Yeah. It was everything. And then eventually it was the Warriors. Like, they were really pretty far down the pecking order in terms of coverage, in terms of attention. I didn't know anybody who were like diehard Warrior fans in their, like in jerseys or anything. Like, I don't remember gear even. I don't remember a lot of Warriors gear. And now, I grew up in the South Bay, but still we were fans of pretty much everything, both sides of the Bay. So it's funny. So yeah, my memory of that, I don't even know, were the Warriors on like channel 44 back in the day? Was it channel 11 in San Jose? Like, that's
a great point.
They were not on a primary channel.
I don't know.
They were not on 4, 5, or 7.
Yeah, they were on. Maybe they were on channel 2 for a moment.
Maybe they were on KTVU for a while. I thought,
a great point.
Yeah, channel 44 was like our primary UHF channel, right? That was like, I think, our Leave It to Beaver channel.
Yep, and 36, right? You also had 36
and
there.
We had 36, yeah. And in San Jose, 36 and 11, I think, were our local ones. Everything else was either Oakland or San Francisco. Yeah, we're really dating ourselves, dude.
Oh, but that's only locals know that stuff, man. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That
awesome.
And the Denevi camera commercials. So,
Howard, thank you so much. You can follow Howard Beck on Twitter @Howard Beck. And before you go, anything you want to promote, and who's winning Game 6? What's your prediction?
I mean, look, I've said before, I have an irrational belief in the Warriors, which in this case is coming up against my other thing, which is that I always say never bet against LeBron James, which I've said for most of his career. So these two principles are coming into severe conflict here. I still believe in the aura of the Warriors. I also think like the Lakers may just be gassed a bit, right? LeBron's having to work pretty hard in this series. He's got a lot of miles on him. He's putting in a lot of minutes. His foot probably still isn't right. That hasn't been talked about quite as much lately.
And he limped a moment there. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, there was. Yeah. You're right. There was a little moment there. So I just, if the Warriors are going down, and granted, if it gets to Game 7, I'm going to have a hard time believing they're going to go down at home. but I also just don't believe they're going down in a game 6. So I would predict I predict the Warriors by a hair. Maybe we see game 6 Klay. That would be fun.
That would be.
And game 7s are fun. There's a possibility. I was talking about this with Zach Lowe earlier on his pod. Like there's a possibility of 4 game 7s still, which would be just epic. So we'll see. As terms of promotion, follow me on Twitter at Howard Beck. I'm also on Blue Sky. If you can find me there, if you can actually get an invite to Blue Sky, I'm on there. I don't have any invites to distribute. And all of my writing is on an Authory page. That's author with a Y on the end, authory.com/Howard Beck. And all of my stuff that I'm writing for GQ Sports, my past stuff for Sports Illustrated, New York Times, everything is all there.
Yeah, that's an incredible resume. I mean, the New York Times alone, I mean, that's impressive, sir. Howard, thank you so much for coming on. And thanks for going way past what we scheduled. Pleasure. Thank you, man. Thank you so much, Howard.
Appreciate it, Cyrus. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thank you. Take care.